जय हिंद। तो कैसे हैं आप लोग? मेरा नाम है, नाम जान के क्या ही करना, काम से मतलब रखते हैं। वेलकम टू आवर चैनल पाइपर टूना। तो तैयार हो जाइए हमारे साथ लाइव एक्सप्रेस की जर्नी पे और टकटकी लगाकर बिल्कुल देखते जाइए मेरे साथ लाइव रीडिंग इंडियन एक्सप्रेस की। तो चलते हैं हमारे लाइव एक्सप्रेस की जर्नी पर। यूं ही कट जाएगा सफ़र साथ चलने से, मंजिलें आएगी नज़र साथ चलने से। तो आज जो हम कवर करने वाले हैं टॉपिक्स, उसमें है पेज नंबर 3, 8, 9, 12, 13, 15, 16 एंड 17। सो लेट्स स्टार्ट। तो दोस्तों, आज है अगस्त 18, 2023। जो पहला पेज नंबर पे पहला टॉपिक हमारा है पेज 3 पर। लैंडर डिपार्ट्स सक्सेसफुली 5 days to moon touchdown. Let's zoom it. Thanks for the ride, mate. Lander in note to propulsion module via ISRO. The Chandrayaan-3 mission moved into the last phase of its journey to the moon, with the lander module successfully separating from the main spacecraft Thursday afternoon. Thanks for the ride, mate, ISRO said in a message on microblogging site X, imagining a conversation between the lander module and the propulsion module. Lander module is set to descend to a slightly lower orbit upon a deboosting planned from tomorrow around 1600 hours IST, that is around 4 pm, ISRO said. Chandrayaan 3 spacecraft comprises two parts. The lander module, which also houses the rover component, is designed to travel to the moon and is expected to land on the lunar surface on August 23. The leftover part, the propulsion module, whose job was to transport the lander to the moon's orbit, will continue to go around the moon for a few months, possibly even years, in an outer orbit. The remaining journey to the moon would be made by the lander module on its own. As of now, it is in an orbit that is roughly about 150 kilometers from the lunar surface. The lander module is scheduled to make two orbit reduction maneuvers over the coming days, first attaining a circular 100 by 100 kilometer orbit, then coming down further into a 100 by 30 kilometer orbit. It is from here that the lander will begin its final descent to make a touchdown on the moon next Wednesday. Before that, all the instruments on board the lander will be activated and tested to check whether they are functioning normally. A successful mission this time would mean India's entry into a small club of nations who have achieved the feat, the previous three being the US, the former Soviet Union, and China. The propulsion module, in the meanwhile, will continue to go around the moon for an as yet unspecified period of time. Initially, the mission of life of the propulsion module was supposed to be 3 to 6 months, but ISRO said Thursday that it will continue its journey in the current orbit for months or years. The propulsion module of Chandrayaan 3 has been doing the job of the orbiter component in Chandrayaan 2. It is equipped with one instrument called SHAPE spectropolarimetry of habitable planet Earth, whose job is to make spectroscopic study of the Earth's atmosphere from that distance and try to pick up signals that will help scientists understand the markers of life on planets outside our solar system. ISRO highlighted the fact that India now has three spacecraft going around the moon. Our next topic will be, but before going to next topic, let's see what's in the nutshell. The race to the moon south. Russia's Luna 25 mission entered the lunar orbit Wednesday and is in a position to make a landing on August 21, 2 days ahead of the currently scheduled landing time of the Indian lander. Both missions are supposed to land in the higher altitudes of the moon, Chandrayaan 3 at around 69 degrees south latitude and Luna 25 a little further south at around 72 degree latitude. All previous missions to land on the moon have touched down near its equator. Our next topic is about Goa. Goa is the only state with a UCC Uniform Civil Code left behind by Portuguese. What it looks like. It was a strange demand. Effie Noronha had got a call from the Cabica de Casal, an administrator appointed to make an inventory of assets for partition in his maternal family, asking for his mother's dowry certificate. Noronha's parents married nearly 6 decades ago and his mother died a few years ago, but the certificate was crucial to decide his mother's inheritance, which his father would share in half. Birth, marriage, death, and succession. Everyone does the same paperwork. It is recorded and registered. So we found the tattered piece of paper. My mother came from a rich family, but my father never cared much about that. When someone dies, they start carefully counting the hairs. No, Noronha, 70, who is aged 70 years, said, with the market of a uniform civil code likely to be kept alive in the run up to the 2024 elections, even if, as the Indian Express earlier reported, the BJP led government is unlikely to push it through in its current term, the crucial question is what form and shape the proposed law would take. One model that is held up as an example is the Portuguese Civil Code, a 156-year-old 647-page code that was enacted in the Azuda Palace in Lisbon. The code continues to govern Goa and the Union Territory of Daman and Diu and Dadar and Nagar Haveli. Continued on page number 4. Haveli. After its liberation in 1961, Goa, with a population of just 6 lakh at that time, retained the Portuguese Civil Code, making it the only state to have a uniform civil code for all religions. This crucial feature is what the UCC aspires to achieve. After the 22nd Law Commission on June 14 sought public comments on the UCC, Goa Chief Minister Pramod Sawant, among the most vocal supporters of the idea, had said UCC has been followed in Goa since the time of liberation. Minorities comprise more than 27% of the population in Goa, and in the last 60 years, there has not been any problem or complaint. The 19th century law is now being closely scrutinized for how uniform it is. A radical idea for India is 1861. The Portuguese code codified the communion of assets, a joint ownership of marital property, which was followed in Portugal since the Middle Ages. The law gives spouses an equal right in each other's assets, which means neither party can sell it without the other's consent. Under Hindu law, while the wife is a legal heir, she is not a joint owner of the husband's property. Communion of assets is a great idea, but it was meant for a time when there was no concept of a divorce. Former Advocate General and Senior Advocate S.D. Lotlikar said, a divorce means a husband is entitled to half of any inheritance from the wife's parents, but even the seemingly equal law has riders. Even when a wife has joint ownership of her husband's property, the law gives him the right to manage the estate. On inheritance, the code is quite similar to the Muslim law in including lineal ascendants and descendants as legal heirs. This means parents and siblings of an individual can inherit property, unlike in Hindu law, which passes only to spouse or descendant. The crucial law difference is that the Portuguese law treats sons and daughters equally, while Hindu daughters secured the right to an equal share in ancestral property only after the 2005 amendment to the Hindu Succession Act. Muslim daughters are entitled only to half of the share that a son gets. Rashida Mujawar, a Panjim-based women's rights activist, said, our daughters get an equal share in the property and there is a Goan identity that is homogeneous, she said. The Portuguese law applies only to Goans. By legal definition, only those who either of their parents or grandparents were born in Goa before December 20, 1961. Amidst changing demography with the influx of migrants and Goans taking up Portuguese passports, it is unclear how many of the 15 lakh local population in the state are governed by the common code. The Portuguese laws allow those born in its erstwhile colonies for up to 3 generations to take up Portuguese citizenship. In principle, extending the code to everyone in Goa is a good idea, but is there a real necessity when a national step is being taken? Said Vijay Sardesai, Goa Forward Party MLA from Margao's Fatorda, adding the Goan UCC is different from Hindus and Catholics. And women's rights are also not perfectly equal to men's. The Goan UCC needs to be modified and updated to fulfill modern aspirations. The code carves out crucial exceptions for Hindus and Catholics. The Code of Gentile Hindu Uses and Customs of Goa was enacted in 1880, a decade after the Civil Code came into effect to codify the concessions of the Hindus. One key exemption from 1880 is crucial in Indian law too. Partnership, so suicide or the taxation benefits for a Hindu undivided family. The code also recognizes a mayoral or carta of a Hindu family who heads the family. A controversial exception to the monogamy rule in the Portuguese code is also made for Hindus. Although the provisions had not been invoked in the post colonial era, a Hindu male is allowed the right to bigamy with the consent of his wife if she fails to deliver a child by the age of 25 or if she fails to deliver a male child by the age of 30. For Catholics, the code did not envision a clear separation of church and state for personal laws. Canonical marriages enjoyed the same status as civil marriages, and rulings of the church is in annulling a marriage or granting of divorce were given legal sanctity. However, in 2019, the Goa bench of the Bombay High Court struck down the portions of a Portuguese edict that gave legal sanctity to rulings of ecclesiastical tribunals in the former Portuguese colony. The 2538 articles in the Portuguese Civil Code deal with not just personal laws and property, from recognizing the right to existence, right to liberty, and inviolability of thought as fundamental rights to the law on patients, copyrights, and shipwrecks. The code was intended to be the complete law of the land. Till 1961, amendments made in Portugal would be applicable in Goa. With Indian legislation extending to Goa, several provisions of the code stand repealed. However, without a direct amendment since 1961, the code stands frozen in time. Next, we will see on page number 8. Here, our topic is President launches Navy stealth frigate, step towards goal of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Okay. President Draupadi Murmu on Thursday launched the advanced stealth frigate Vindhyagiri for the Indian Navy in Kolkata and said its rollout was a step towards achieving the goal of an Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliant India, through indigenous shipbuilding. The ship was built by Garden Reach Shipbuilders and Engineers Limited GRSE facility at Kolkata. The event was also attended by West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee, Governor C.V. Anand Bose, and Chief of Naval Staff Admiral R. Hari Kumar, former Indian skipper Saurabh Ganguly, and Kolkata Police Commissioner Vineet Goyal, among the other dignitaries. Stealth frigate Vindhyagiri is the sixth vessel rolled out as part of the Project 17A frigate. It is the sixth vessel. The five other ships, INS Nilgiri, Udaygiri, Himgiri, Taragiri, and Dunagiri, were launched between 2019 and 2022. Officials said the ship derives its name from the Vindhya Ranges in Karnataka. Vindhya Ranges are in Karnataka. According to the officials, the P-17A ships are guided missile frigates. They are 149-meter long with a displacement of approximately 6,670 tons and a speed of 28 knots. These ships are capable of neutralizing threats in all three dimensions of air, surface, and subsurface, said a GRSE official. The president said, I am very happy to be here at the launch of Vindhyagiri. This event marks a move towards enhancing India's maritime capabilities. Vindhyagiri is also a step towards achieving the goal of a Atmanirbhar Bharat through indigenous shipbuilding. Addressing the press after the program, Chief of Naval Staff Admiral R. Hari Kumar said that the Indian Navy is striving towards becoming self-reliant by 2047. Talking about the maritime prowess of neighboring countries like China, he said, when we build a navy, we build it to secure our interests, not to compete with anyone. We have a prospective maritime plan. We are looking at building everything in India. Now, on page number 9, we will see another topic, which is government WHO chief stress importance of traditional medicine. What is this? A year after the WHO Global Center for Traditional Medicine was set up in India, the country is hosting the first global summit alongside the ongoing G20 ministerial meeting of the health track with an aim to help identify areas of collaboration in traditional medicine using Union Ayush Minister Sarbananda Sonowal said on Thursday. The Gandhinagar Declaration, the outcome of the health track meetings conducted over the year, will create a dedicated platform for traditional medicine under the G20 framework. Sonowal said on Thursday, our discussion here aims to forge the foundation for a dedicated platform for traditional medicine within the framework of G20 that seeks to foster international collaboration, share best practices, and seamlessly integrate traditional medicine into the heart of mainstream healthcare system. Ayush Secretary Rajesh Kotecha had earlier said that the WHO Center will study not only traditional medicine from India but also collaborate with research institutes abroad to study and generate evidence about their traditional medicine practices. WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus on Thursday said, traditional medicine is not a thing of the past. There is a growing demand for traditional medicine across countries, communities, and cultures. Traditional complementary and integrative medicine is especially important for preventing and treating non communicable diseases, for mental health, and for healthy aging. Ghebreyesus cited examples of how knowledge of traditional forms of medicine helped discover modern drugs such as aspirin from bark of willow tree, childhood cancer drugs from Madagascar, periwinkle, cardiovascular and hypertension drugs from hawthorn and foxglove, and artemisinin from sweet wormwood. If effectively implemented, he said, the Gujarat Declaration, the main outcome of this global summit, will enhance the appropriate integration of traditional medicine into national health system. The WHO DG had three recommendations for countries. We urge all countries to commit to examining how best to integrate traditional and complementary medicine into their national health system. Second, identify evidence based and actionable recommendations that can inform the next WHO traditional medicine global strategy. Third, unlock the power of traditional medicine through science. Scientists have also appreciated the important role of the WHO Global Center when it comes to identifying therapies that may be harmful. Professor Harold Warmus, chair WHO Science Council, said, we need to face a very important real life fact that traditional medicines are very widely used, and it is important to understand what ingredients are actually in traditional medicine, why they work in some cases, and how we can improve their use. Importantly, we need to understand and identify which traditional medicines do not work or, on occasion, detrimental drug interaction or cause unacceptable side effects. Now on page number 12 we have the standing group, which is the express editorial page. Standing the ground. We will cover the standing the ground and more than words here. These two topics, more than words and standing the ground. Let's see what is it. Another round of India-China border talks end in stalemate again. Not again, yaar. Normalization of bilateral ties is a long haul. The latest round of border talks between India and China did not lead to any solution. According to the officials readout after the meeting, more than 3 years and 3 months have passed since the border standoff started in eastern Ladakh. This has led to an unprecedented buildup of troops on both sides. Over the last 3 years, the Indian Air Force is estimated to have airlifted nearly 70,000 troops and heavy platforms, including tanks, artillery guns weighing over 9,000 tons, as part of efforts towards enhancing the overall operational preparedness in eastern Ladakh. The government has been making the case for the last couple of weeks that it has built infrastructure in the border area over the last 9 years, which has led to faster deployment of forces in the standoff. India and Chinese foreign ministers and national security advisors had met last month before the Corps commander level talks, raising hopes that there could be a breakthrough before Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping meet in Johannesburg for the BRICS Leaders Summit on August 22-23. Hope has a precedent. In 2017, the 2.5 month Doklam border standoff was resolved just days before Modi and Xi met in Xiamen for the BRICS Leaders Summit. The 3 week long 2013 standoff in Depsang was resolved weeks before this Chinese Premier Wen Jiabao was visiting India. The window of opportunity exists between now and Chinese President Xi's visit to the India for the G20 summit. India has made it clear so far that the border standoff affects bilateral relations and only a complete de escalation will lead to normalcy in the ties, while disengagement at the specific frictions points can be achieved, a broader de escalation will take time. This is because troops and equipment will take time to be moved from the border areas. In that sense, this standoff is more complicated than the recent ones in the last 10 years. It is similar to the Sumdorong Chu standoff in 1986-87, which took almost 7 years to completely disengage and de-escalate. The fact that the border standoff started months after the 18th meeting between Sai and Modi at the Mamallapuram informal summit indicated that the build-up was at the directions of the political leadership in Beijing, not a local military operation. It became even clear that it had the sanction of the Chinese Communist Party since the standoff has sustained over the last 3 years. Delhi must not buzz and demand complete withdrawal of troops and de-escalation before it normalizes ties. Sai visit next month gives India some leverage. The government must use it. More than words, Supreme Court's move to combat stereotypes in judicial language is a welcome step towards ensuring greater gender equity, justice. A girl aged 24 years is weak and vulnerable, capable of being exploited in many ways. The court exercising parents' patriae jurisdiction is concerned with the welfare of a girl of her age. Her marriage, being the most important decision in her life, can only be taken with the involvement of her parents. So said the Kerala High Court in May 2017 as it annulled the marriage of Shafeen Jahan with Hadia, who had converted to Islam and moved away from her family. The following year, as it reversed this ruling, criticized widely for the paternalistic mindset it betrayed, the Supreme Court observed. The High Court has lost sight of the fact that she is a measure capable of her own decisions and is entitled to the right recognized by the Constitution to lead her life exactly as she pleases. The Hadia case is one of several examples cited in a first of its kind handbook on combating gender stereotypes issued by the Supreme Court. The handbook is a welcome, much needed step towards raising awareness among the legal fraternity about the adverse impact of stereotyping language in judicial decision making. These can, Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud notes in the forward, not only affect the outcome of a case but also promote harmful ideas about women. Indeed, all individuals across the gender spectrum, ultimately undermining the transformative projects of the law and the Constitution of India, which seek to secure equal rights to all persons irrespective of gender. By underscoring the importance of the right words, not devoted wife but wife, not career women but women. The court lends its institutional heft to the growing global understanding of the damage done by the stereotyping embedded in and perpetuated by language. For example, a 2020 study at Carnegie Mellon University found that the cultural stereotyping in 25 languages about women being more suited to the, to the domestic sphere undermined gender equity efforts in STEM careers. And it is not just women's educational and employment prospects that are put at risk by stereotyping language, there are also implications for their safety and well being and the larger pursuit of justice, as the Supreme Court makes clear in its handbook, where it cites rulings on cases of sexual violence to show how assumptions about a woman's loose moral character have affected judicial reasoning. To insist on using the right words is not to indulge in mere semantics. That is what the court, which has all along taken the lead in expanding and guarding the space for women at home and work, has unambiguously signaled. It is now for the lower judiciary to take its cue from the apex court. Now we will move to page number 13. In the forest, a transformation. Implementation of Forest Rights Act in Jammu and Kashmir will require hand-holding tribal communities. Civil society has to partner government in their endeavor. Here we will see community rights claim, as we will seeing some charts, some data are here. Let's study the paragraph. The public policy discourse on Jammu and Kashmir has often discounted the region's complex sociocultural, anthropological, and linguistic perspective. The security oriented approach became predominant because of the 3 decade long insurgency in the region. Tribal communities, which constitute around 12% of the Union Territory's population, have been the center of a recent debate on resource allocation and recognition of rights. The first survey of transhumance conducted by the Tribal Affairs Department in 2021 aimed at evidence-based policymaking picked the ethnic migratory pastoral population at 612,000, the largest anywhere in the world. This section, Gujjars, Bakarwals, Gaddi, Sippi, Dard, Shin and Bot, constitutes more than 30% of the UT's tribal population. These pastoral communities largely depend on livestock husbandry organized around seasonal migration between the summer pastures and winter pastures. The biannual migration involves traveling. This includes women, children, and elderly up to 600 kilometers along with livestock and household goods. Transhumant pastoralism involves several months of grazing and campaign in highland pastures which are notified as demarcated forest and wildlife conservation reserves. These are under the ambit of stricter regulations and management guidelines. The historic experience of successful community centric conservation models in India and the growing demand for recognizing the rights of forest dwellers and protecting their interests when they conflict with infrastructure development requirements such as forest harvesting, mining, industrialization, led to the enactment of the Scheduled Tribes and Other Traditional Forest Dwellers Recognition of Rights Act 2006, the Forest Rights Act or FRA. The act came into force formally in 2008 with the notification of rules and guidelines. This was implemented by all states except Jammu and Kashmir, which required special legislation to be extended. The applicability of FRA, Forest Rights Act. The states quickly adapted to the requirements of this landmark legislation, which not only recognized the rights of tribal communities and other forest dwellers over land and resources but also empowered them by provisioning the use of forest land for services like healthcare, education, power, potable water supply, and connectivity. Such services were not permitted under forest laws except for duly compensated land diversion, largely for mega projects. Communities were now in charge of the resources and ways these ought to be utilized. The preliminary exercise was completed by states by the time rules were notified by the center. Jammu Kashmir was expected to implement the FRA like all other states in 2008. Particularly given its large pastoral and transhumant tribal populations whose livelihoods are linked to the forests. It, however, did not adopt the act. Question remains on the denial of rights to the tribal communities over a long period. The applicability of all central laws to Jammu and Kashmir post 2019 paved the way for FRA implementation. Delayed by a decade and a half, the process started in 2021 with public communication, capacity building, and framing of rules. In September 2021, FRA implementation was formally rolled out at Srinagar and Jammu in historic ceremonies organized by the Tribal Affairs Department in collaboration with the Forest Department. The Lieutenant Governor handed over the titles to tribal forest dwellers. After prolonged indifference to recognizing community rights in the state, the first step towards empowering these communities was taken. A lot was now required to be done collectively to give effect to this enabling provision. The 2011 decadal census estimated India's tribal population as 104.5 million or 8.6% of the country's total population. When Jammu and Kashmir, with a tribal population of 12%, began rolling out the FRA, 20 other states with sizable tribal communities had settled 47% of the individual rights claims and 59% of community rights claims over the forest land. Many who had been silent to the deprivation of rights in Jammu and Kashmir over a long period have been quick to question the perceived delay in the conferment of rights. Months after Jammu and Kashmir rolled out the FRA, it was expected that such stakeholders would come to the aid of the communities in claiming rights over the land. The challenge is much bigger than numbers. It's about enabling communities to recognize rights. An analysis of FRA implementation in Jammu and Kashmir between September 2021 and May 2023 reveals that more than 4,500 titles have been issued benefiting 60,000 families in accessing forest land and associated resources. Community forest resources titles have been conferred for 44.59% of the 9,423 claimants. A lot is required to be done with regard to individual forest rights. This requires hand-holding tribal families in applying for the rights with the supporting records. The FRA implementation, unlike any regular government welfare scheme, has to take into account traditional folklore and record-keeping mechanism. It also has to reckon with accessing tough terrains, crossing geographical barriers, dealing with mobile communities, poor literacy rates, and intangibles like the feeling of historic deprivation and exclusion. The process has to be led from within the community. The absence of a leadership that can enable people to access the provisions could increase the gap between the haves and have nots in the community. The fact that the disposal rate of the community FRS is 45% while that of individual rights is in single digits shows that families left to their own are not able to prove eligibility. The Tribal Affairs Department, NGOs, youth groups, and other stakeholders have lately started an outreach to address this and are working on models to enable individual families to claim their rights under the Forest Reservation Act FRA. It is worrying that more than 92.57% of the rejected claims have been declined by the Gram Sabha, a village body comprising officials, non-officials, and elected members of tribal communities. Only 7.43% claims have been rejected at the subdivisional and district committee levels. This indicates the enormity of the task of building capacities of local self-government and community members, a core responsibility for government departments and community leadership. FRA offers the legislative framework to recognize the rights of tribal communities and traditional forest dwellers, but its success would depend on an effective community empowerment approach. In December 2022, the government implemented a new policy to do away with the commercial tendering of forest produce and empower tribal pastoralists and forest dwellers to correct process, use, and commercialize non-timber forest produce for supporting their livelihood. This is a watershed moment in recognizing the rights of pastoral tribes over resources, their sustainable use and conservation. Other than accessing forest resources, the FRA enables tribal communities to avail services like healthcare, education, energy, and connectivity. The poor literacy rates, less than 50% among the tribal population and 16.74% among migratory tribes, coupled with the absence of required records, seasonal migration, and local social cultural issues, pose a serious challenge to the FRA implementation. It requires all stakeholders, governmental and non governmental, in steering tribal communities towards rightful users for forest resources and stakeholders in conservation. The writer is an IS serving as Secretary, Tribal Affairs Department, and actively working in Jammu and Kashmir for FRA implementation since April 2021. FRA. Okay. Now, our next topic is on page number 16. Iran sends its foreign minister to Riyadh in its first sign of the thaw. Let's see what is this. Diplomatic missions are being reopened 7 years after storming of Saudi posts. Iran foreign minister traveled to Saudi Arabia on Thursday, marking the first trip to the kingdom by Tehran's top diplomat in year after the two nations reached a detente with Chinese mediation. The visit by Hossein Amir Abdullahian comes as both Saudi Arabia and Iran try to ease tensions between their nations, which long have viewed each other as arch-rivals for influence across the wider Middle East. Challenges remain, however, particularly over Iran's nuclear program, the Saudi led war in Yemen, and region's waterways security. Amirab Dulhanian's trip to Riyadh comes as the two nations are reopening diplomatic missions in each other's countries. Amirab Dolahian met with his Saudi counterpart Prince Faisal bin Farhan. Our meeting today is a continuation of the steps taken towards implementing the agreement to resume diplomatic relations, which represents a pivotal platform in the history of the two countries and the path of regional security, Prince Faisal said. Amir Abdullahian acknowledged that President Ibrahim Raisi hopes to travel to Saudi Arabia on an official visit. The last Iranian foreign minister to visit Saudi Arabia on a public trip was Mohammad Javad Zarif, who traveled to the kingdom in 2015 to offer condolences for the death of King Abdullah. The kingdom broke ties with Iran in 2016 after protesters invaded Saudi diplomatic posts. Saudi had executed a prominent Shiite cleric with 46 other days earlier, triggering demonstrations. Since then, the US withdrew from Iran's nuclear deal with world powers in 2018. Iran has been blamed for attacks after that, including one targeting the heart of Saudi Arabia's oil industry in 2019, temporarily halving the kingdom's crude production. Our next topic is here will help Lanka in restructuring debt before IMF review. चाइना ये पीछे पड़ा हुआ है हमारे. Press Trust of India, Colombo. Sri Lanka's largest bilateral creditor, China has assured the island nation its help in effectively addressing the debt challenges as it has to finalize the external and domestic debt structuring of $41 billion by September before IMF's first review. The International Monetary Fund is set to conduct its first review of the $2.9 billion bailout granted to Sri Lanka in March this year from September 11 to 19. A release from the Prime Minister's office on Wednesday said Wang Yi, the foreign minister and director of the Office of the Foreign Affairs Commission of the ruling Communist Party of China Central Committee, who met Sri Lanka Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena on the sidelines of the 7th China South Asia Expo, assured that it will help in effectively addressing the country's debt challenge. सब इसको लपेटने में लगा हुआ है. अब देखिए इंडिया क्या करता है. A pig kidney works in a donated human body for over a month. Researchers use modified pigs for transplants as decades old attempts failed due to immune system attacks. Now, surgeons transplanted a pig kidney in a brain dead man, and for over a month it's worked normally. A critical step towards an operation, the New York team hopes to eventually try in living patients. Scientists around the country are racing to learn how to use animals' organs to save human lives and bodies donated for research, offer a remarkable rehearsal. The latest experiment announced Wednesday by NYU Langone Health marks the longest a pig kidney has functioned in a person, albeit a deceased one, and it's not over. Researchers are set to track the kidney's performance for a second month. Is the organ really going to work like a human organ? So far, it is looking like it. Dr. Robert Montgomery, director of NYU Langone's Transplant Institute, said it looks even better than a human kidney. Montgomery said on July 14 as he replaced a deceased man's own kidney with a single kidney from a genetically modified pig and watched him it immediately start producing urine. Wow, it's a milestone. The possibility that pig kidney might one day help ease uh, a dire shortage of transplantable organs persuaded the family of Maurice Moe Miller from upstate New York to donate his body for the experiment. He died he had died suddenly at 57 with a previously undiagnosed brain cancer, ruling out routine organ donation. I struggled with it, his sister, Mary Miller Duffy, told the AP about her decision. But he linked helping others, and I think this is what my brother would want. So I offered my brother to them. Attempts at animal to human transplants or xenotransplantation have failed for decades as people's immune system attacked the foreign tissue. Now researchers are using pigs genetically modified so their organs better match human bodies. Last year, with special permission from regulators, University of Maryland surgeons transplanted a gene-edited pig heart into a dying man who was out of other options. He survived only 2 months before the organ failed for reasons that aren't fully understood, but that offers lesson for future attempts. Next, rather than last ditch efforts, Food and Drug Administration is considered whether to allow some small but rigorous studies of pig heart or kidney transplant in volunteer patients. The NYU experiment is one of a string of developments aimed at start of such trials. Also Wednesday, University of Alabama at Birmingham reported another success. A pair of pig kidneys work normally inside another body for several days. How long should these experiments last? Doctors said that not clear and among the ethical questions are how long a family is comfortable because maintaining a brain dead person on ventilator is difficult. It's also dependent on how stable the donated body is. Okay, then we will see on page number 17. It is here. Here is bond TB T-bill yields see sharp rise as inflation spikes, liquidity tightens. A week after the Reserve Bank of India RBI opted for status quo in its monetary policy, yields on 10-year benchmark bonds and treasury bills rose sharply Thursday as retail inflation spiked to 7.44% in July. Liquidity in the system tightened and pressure mounted on short term interest rates. India's benchmark 10-year bond rose to 7.25% from the previous level of 7.20% on August 14 and T-bill yields rose up to 13 basis points Thursday. 10-year bond yields have gone up by 17 basis points in the last 1 month. RBI had last week directed banks to maintain an incremental cash reserve ratio ICRR of 10% of banks in order to manage surplus liquidity in the banking system. The temporary measure will suck out over rupees 1 lakh crore of excess liquidity from the banking system. Soon after, retail inflation saw a big rise amidst skyrocketing vegetable prices. A rise in bond yields indicates that there is upward pressure on interest rates. The rupee fell by 20 basis points to 83.15 against the dollar on Thursday. The liquidity stress is in the system is getting reflected in the market after the invocation of the incremental CRR. Surplus liquidity has dried up to just rupees 21,000 crore as of August 14. This was reflected in the T-bill auction cutoffs on Thursday. This increase of 11 to 13 basis points is significant as the 364 days T-bill has crossed the 7% mark. The 10-year is ruling at 7.25% and it does look like that there can be some further upward movement except as liquidity tightens in the market, said Madan Sabnavis, chief economist, Bank of Baroda. This rise can be attributed to the post credit policy impact as well as the fact that inflation came in at 7.44%, which was well above expectations, he said. The 91-day T bill yield moved up from 6.74% last week to 6.87%. 182 days is up from 6.91% to 7.03%, and 364 days has gone up from 6.96% to 7.07% on Thursday. This also means that the RBI will continue to be hawkish for an extended period of time, as there was an indication given that August inflation too tend to be high. The market has been affected by such negative sentiment too, Sabnavis said. Simultaneously, the rupee has fallen below the 83 level with the dollar is strengthening and foreign investors in a nervous mood. The trade deficit caused by falling imports has added to the sentiment. This is time when the speculative elements comes into the market. The next few trading sessions will be important to watch whether the 83 level stays or there is a retreat. RBI's inflation projection has believed hopes for a reduction in the interest rates in the current financial year 2023-24 as retail inflation is expected to remain elevated due to high vegetables and food grain prices. July retail inflation spiked to 7.44% from 4.87% in the previous month as vegetables cereals prices skyrocketed. Retail inflation, which is expected to remain above the 5% till the first quarter of 24-25, is likely to hit the 6.2% level in the ongoing quarter. महंगाई की तो बड़ी मार है यार. Now we will see disinvestment to fall 60% short of target. This topic. With multiple state elections and the general elections approaching, the government is going slow on large strategic disinvestment plans, including that of IDBI Bank, with all of these being likely pushed back to beyond the current financial year, according to sources. This would result in a shortfall of Rs 30,000 crore or 60% in disinvestment receipts in the year compared with relatively modest budget estimate BE of Rs 51,000 crore. Disinvestment receipts were Rs 35,293 crore or 54% of the targeted 65,000 crore in the fiscal year 23. The last time the disinvestment target was achieved was in fiscal year 19 when Rs 84,972 crore was mobilized against a target of Rs 80,000 crore. Big ticket strategic disinvestment deals may not happen, one source said. However, the likely shortfall won't impact the government's fiscal match as tax and non-tax revenues might overshoot budget estimates and bridge the shortfall on the disinvestment receipt front. With the states including Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan and Chhattisgarh going to elections in November-December and general elections due in April-May 2024, there is a lack of political will at this juncture to carry out big-ticket strategic sales. Given the progress of the IDBI stake sales process, the transactions was doable within fiscal year 24. However, another source maintained that the process was still to conclude the deal before March 24. We will do our best to conclude this IDBI bank in this financial year, the person said. The RBI is waiting the credentials of bidders before proceeding further in the process. IDBI Bank's share price closed at Rs 61.37 on the BSE on Thursday, down 1.05% from the last close. The government's comfortable fiscal position means the disinvestment shortfall will not have any impact on budgeted revenues as dividends from the Reserve Bank of India and state-run entities are expected to exceed the target substantially in fiscal year 24. On January 7, the center received expressions of interest from domestic and foreign investors for the 60.72% stake in IDBI Bank. The offer comprises 30.48% from the government market value of rupees 20,100 crores and 30.24% from the current promoter LIC. So these were the topics for today. Keep learning, keep practicing hard, do daily answer writing. Okay, believe in yourself, and I will sharing I will be sharing the PDF of just important pages in the description. So do check out the description, guys. Have a nice day. Bye bye.